أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الباصفين الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يبتغي غير الإسلام دينا فلن يقبل منه وهو في الآخرة من الخاسرين صدق الله العلي العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is the last and the third Majlis in this series of Majlis, commemorating the martyrdom of Bibi Sakīna sallallahu alayha in these nights and these days when we continue to commemorate the Ayyam-e-Azha of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussain ibn Ali and his companions. In the last two nights, our discussions have been all over the place. And we've tried to keep the focus on the ayat that are recited. And I presented this phenomena last night, which of course I left it for your understanding to figure out. And inshallah, I'm sure the homework that was given on a Sunday morning and the afternoon, when you had enough time to ponder and think about it. Even if you didn't find the answers, in fact, if you looked at it, you pondered, you wrote down those ayat, and you referred back to them, that was the main objective. Objective is to be able to open the ayat of Quran, read the translation, and understand it. Make this Quran to be part of our life, daily life, not just on the weekends, not just on the wiladat and shahadat, and not just when someone dies. And therefore, the three sets of ayat that I presented for you, which apparently posed a contradiction in Quran. The first set was when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, fear Allah the way He deserves. Ittaqullah haqqa tuqatihi. And at the same time, in another place in Quran, Allah says, Ittaqullah mastata'tum. Fear Allah the way, however you can. So what we understood from this phenomenon was that there's a contradiction that exists in Quran. There was this man I mentioned, Ishaq-e-Kindi, who was one of the great scholars and the philosophers of the early philosophers of Islam. He started compiling a book, Tanaquzat fil Quran. It was in the time of our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam said to his student that why don't you stop your teacher from making a blunder? That is a mistake that he's making. He said, Imam, how can I stop my teacher? After all, he's my ustad and I'm his shagird. Imam said, get close to him where you are comfortable to speak to him, comfortable enough to speak to him. And then I'll tell you what to ask. When he was close enough to his teacher, Imam told him something. He went up to his teacher and said, "Do I have permission to ask you a question?" Frankly. He said, "Yes, go ahead." He said, "It's regarding the book that you're compiling." He said, "What's your question?" He said, "You're compiling a book of the ayat that are contradictory." He said, "Yes." He said, "What gave you the conclusion that these ayat are contradictory? Is it your understanding of these ayat, or this is what Allah really meant?" For a moment he thought about it. He said, "How can I know what Allah meant by these ayat? This is my understanding that these ayat are contradictory to one another." He said, "Who told you that?" He said, "I just came up with this. Did not want to reveal Imam's the discussion that he had with Imam." He said, "Being my student, it's not possible that you came up with this. Tell me who told you this." He then referred towards our 11th Imam. And he realized the mistake that he was making. He said, "No, this is my understanding of these ayat of Quran, based on my whims and my conclusions. And definitely I don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means by it." And therefore he burned all the work that he had done, destroyed all the work that he had done, and he repented. And he acknowledged, "Allahu ya'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata." Allah knows best where to place his risalah. Meaning the Imam of the time is the best guide, even when people like him, a scholar, is making a mistake. So regarding that first set of ayah, that is Haqiqin, must have come up as well. The first ayah says, "Fear Allah the way He deserves." The second says, "Fear Allah however you can." Apparent contradiction. One of our scholars, Mohsin Qarati, he's done a tafsir al-Nur. I would encourage that if you speak Farsi, you can use this tafsir. If you speak Urdu, it's been translated into Urdu as well. I have done a great deal of translation of this in English in my works, but not entirely. So it is available. And he has a usloob of doing the tafsir which is am fahm, meaning for laymen, not scholars. That was the maqsad, that was the purpose. So that everybody can understand Quran. It doesn't have to be only so complicated that only scholars are able to understand it. So he did a very fahm tafsir. In it he talks about this, and he mentions this. He says, "Ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi." When asked from Imam says, "Ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi" is your destination. When he says, "Ittaqullaha mastata'tum," that means that is your path towards that destination. Meaning there's no contradiction between the two ayat. First ayah says, "Fear Allah the way He deserves," meaning this is the destination that you have to reach. The second ayah says, "Fear Allah according to your ability." This is the path that you must stay upon in order to reach that destination. And therefore, there isn't any contradiction, none whatsoever. Regarding those two set of ayat which talk about the itminan nafs, which says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." With the dhikr of Allah, the hearts are at ease. And the other ayat which says, "Ittaqullah," when mu'mineen, they fear, wajalat qulubuhum, their hearts are trembling. You see, there's a contradiction right there. How is it possible that one dhikr of Allah gives you ease, another dhikr of Allah makes you uneasy? Your hearts start to tremble. So therefore, there's a contradiction according to the translation. Again, Mohsin Qarati gives an example. He said, imagine a child who lives, close to the Imam Barga in this masjid. Let's say someone over here, one of the brothers who lives down the street, maybe half a mile away. He said, why drive? Let's just walk to the Imam Barga, right? So you came here with your 5-year-old son. This 5-year-old son, when you're walking back, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If I can request you to turn off and put your phones on vibration if you can, I inshallah will not be taking too much of your time today. He says, imagine if you were walking back from the masjid going back home, let's say. And as you were walking, after the Majlis ends, which is pretty late at night, your Maghrib is at 9:15, by the time you're walking back home, it's 10 p.m. When you're walking back home, your child who's only 5 years old, does he have any fear of walking back home? No, as long as he's holding on to your hand, he has no fear whatsoever. You might have fear. You might be scared that we might get robbed on the way. You might have an issue that someone might try to rob us, or there might be some animals on the way. But your son, as long as he's holding on to your hand, his heart is at ease. He's got no problem. Yeah, it was only when he was alone he must have been scared. But when he's with you, he's got complete reliance upon you. So he's not going to be afraid of anything. Now, the second day of the Majlis, imagine children were playing. As they were playing, they broke something and they got caught. Now the father looks at the son and he is afraid that what he has done. Father says, we'll talk about it when we get home. Now after the Majlis, they're walking back home. Now when he's holding on to his father's hand, is his heart at ease or is it trembling? Today, because he got in trouble, and father said, I'll talk to you at home. Now his heart is not at ease. The past day, he was completely comfortable. Today, he's afraid and is scared. The same father, whose hand he's holding on to and he's going back home. But the different effect. Similar is the fact over here, when it says, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, that your hearts are at ease when you do the dhikr of Allah. Or when it says, innamal mu'minun idha dhukira Allah wajilat qulubuhum. Mu'min is someone whose hearts tremble when the dhikr of Allah is done. Two possibilities. One, because someone is obedient to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their hearts are at ease. When you are disobedient to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're in trouble and you feel that you are uneasy when it comes to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it also could be the fact that you're still a mu'min and you're still an obedient servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but your heart still trembles from awe and the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whenever the dhikr is done. And let me give you an example of that. As soon as towards the end of the Majlis, I start and convert and I speak about the Masaib of Imam Hussein, how your eyes start to shed tears, your heart becomes vulnerable, and you lose control of your emotions. That is the same feeling that should come when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salatu wa salam, it is mentioned in Riwayat that when he would stand up for Salat and when he would do the wudu, he said, Yasfarra wujuha. His face complexion, it would turn pale. And yartad maghasilahu, his mafasil, his body parts would start shaking. Ilahi, he would make this dua. Za'if, ana za'if, bibabik, I'm standing at your door, the one who's weak and za'if. And his face complexion would change. He would start shaking. And as he used to start praying, someone asked him, "Oh Imam, why is such a condition that is coming upon you?" He said, "Why not? When someone is standing baina yaday al-jabbar, should his face complexion not change? Should you not fear the awe and the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're standing in front of him?" This is where we can distinguish how when we pray and stand up in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Ma'sumin used to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The salat, if you heard, inshallah, many a time from your scholars and visiting scholars as well, that this salat is referred to as what? Mi'rajul Mu'min. Now analyze this Mi'rajul Mu'min. What is this Mi'rajul Mu'min? Rasulullah went to Mi'raj. When he came back, what did people say? "Oh Rasulullah, You met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You visit the heavens. We want to go to the heavens as well. Kind of like when you go for ziyarat, or you go to another place, destination, and you come back and you tell your family about it. They said, we want to go there too. Same thing people said, Rasulullah, we want to go there. Rasulullah said, you don't have to make that travel and journey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the Mi'raj right here for you. As-salatu mi'rajul mu'min. When you stand up in prayer in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can gain that access. What did I do when I ascended to Mi'raj? I spoke with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I had a communication and conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to our Prophet as Ahmad on Arsh Ilahi. He's known as Muhammad here, and he's known as Ahmad over there. It's a lengthy conversation that is mentioned in Hadith Mi'raj. Book by Irshad al-Dailami narrates the entire hadith. One excerpt from that hadith. Rasulullah is having this conversation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him a question, and Rasulullah responds by saying, La adri. I don't know. Now, of course, these are the questions that if I was to ask our Sunday school students, inshallah you were able to revive your school and your Sunday school and your educational activity, because center is here, mashallah. You have qualified scholar over here, inshallah. And your need for that one-on-one teaching is always there. If this is not working, at least something is being going on online. So make sure that you take advantage of that. But having something, even if it's not a formal school, would be beneficial for the community. So with that said, Rasulullah would say, I don't know. If I was to ask this question to the children, they would be able to give some sort of answer. Yet Rasulullah is saying, I don't know. You see the humbleness that Rasulullah has in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times you know the answer. But if this is someone who's asking you the question, who's at the peak of knowledge, you say, well, you know better. Tell us. What would I know? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, Ya Ahmad, بأي وقت يتقرب العبد من الله. What is the time when my servant is closest to me? What is the time? Rasulullah could have given any answer. But what did he say? He said, La adri. I don't know. You know how difficult it is for some of us to say La adri? Someone comes up to me and asks me a question as a talib ilm, as a student of this religion, and if I don't know the answer, I should have the courage to say, I don't know. Instead of giving some wrong answer. ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. And any word that comes out of your mouth, you will be held responsible for that tomorrow. There are two areas in our lives where there's free opinions are given. Two fields, let me say this. One, medicine. At times, all of us become physicians. Someone asks you, I'm having this pain or that pain. You say, yeah, take this herb. My grandmother used to make this and mix this with this other herb, and this would really fix everything. Or I saw this online, that if you mix this thing and you eat it, your sugar will go away, for example. Well, all the research done by the physicians, all down the drain, all of us become what? Experts in science. Second is religion. When people ask you a question about religion, having a informal conversation, every one of us become an expert. Oh, this is what Quran says, this is what I've heard from somewhere, this is what I've seen, and this is what I have read regarding this, regarding that. No. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha also commands us, stay away from giving fatwa on things that do not concern you. دع القول فيما لا يعني. Stay away from that qawl, which does not concern you. So here Allah said to him, what is the time when my servant is closest to me? Rasulullah said, La adri. And then Allah responded, إِذَا كَانَ جَائِعًا أَوْ سَاجِدًا. When my servant is empty stomach and he is prostrating, when he's doing sajda. When you combine the stomach, empty stomach, when you're in the state of fasting, and when you're doing sajda, that is the closest vicinity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine in the month of Ramadan, how many times you get this opportunity. When you pray your Dhuhr, when you pray your Asr, when you pray your Maghrib, when you pray your Isha, all of those are opportunities for you to be the closest in the vicinity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, He is closest to you. Min hablil warid. Right? From your jugular vein. But you and I are away from Him. So with this ayat that I recited for you in the beginning, there's no contradiction. When zikr of Allah is done, you're at ease, and when zikr of Allah is done, when you are fearful. The third occasion that I had mentioned quickly, that Jahannam is a vast place. Surah Qaf, Allah will ask, Halim talati? Jahannam will respond by saying, Hal min mazid? Is there more? That means it's huge, humongous. But then another place, Quran, it says, Jahannam is what? Makanan dayyiqan. A very tight place. Now, how do you put a parallel between these two? How is it that Jahannam could be a huge place on one place in Quran, and another place in Quran it says it's a very tight place? Again, Tafsir al-Nur, Mohsin Qarati explains this. He says, imagine this wall right here you have. If I was to ask you how many nails can you hammer into this wall? Don't do it, it's a beautiful wall. But how many? I said, well, it's a big wall by 10 by 15 feet and maybe 1,000 nails, right? Maybe more. But each nail that goes into the wall, how much space is it taking? It's at a very tight place. He said Jahannam is the same way. While it can encompass and accommodate as many as you throw into it, but each individual thrown into this Jahannam will be at a very tight place. So again, when you look at the ayat of Quran from the lens of Ahlul Bayt alayhi wasallam, you do not find any contradiction whatsoever. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the salat is Mi'raj al-Mu'min. It is that Mi'raj, it is that ascension to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've heard this. When you pray, you're speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you read Quran, Allah is speaking to you. Keep that combination going. Do not cancel out this combination. Very important. If I can ask people to just settle down a little bit, there's a lot of commotion going on, especially in the back. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Settle down. One more last salawat, please. So, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Whoever follows a deen other than Islam, it will not be accepted from them, and that person will be considered amongst the losers on the Day of Judgment. This is the ayat that I recited for you in the beginning. There are a few words that are worth analyzing. Again, our discussions has been around Quran. That this ayat is translated, as I just did, whoever follows a religion other than Islam. Does that mean Islam is saying that anyone who is a non-Muslim is amongst the khasirin, is bound to Jahannam? Is that what this ayat is saying? That means the Christians and the Jews and the followers of other religions, if they're not following Islam, they're bound to where? Jahannam, right? Is that what our belief is? Is that what Islam is saying? There are a few ways of looking at it. The key word that Allah uses in this ayat is yabtaghi. Those who have interest in Arabic linguistics, here you can explore a little bit. There's a word in Arabic to follow, which is yattabi. ittiba, right? As it says in that ayat, that in kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni. Rasulullah said, if you claim to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow me. يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. Allah will love you and He will forgive you. So ittiba' Rasul, following Rasul, is the key to loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, Quran could have used وَمَنْ يَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. Instead it said وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. What's the difference? The difference is, if he had said يَتَّبِعْ, it would have meant that yes, anyone who follows a religion other than Islam. The fact that he said وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي gives you the understanding that someone to whom Islam came and then they disregarded it. And they still didn't follow it. Meaning they had an opportunity. Yet they did not avail that opportunity. They turned it down. They were told this is the path. And they neglected that path. Now this individual has a responsibility. Kind of like if you come here and you tell someone that don't go out right now because it's raining, and that person still goes out, gets wet. See, I warned you. Quran warned. He said, until this deen has been explained to you. If it wasn't explained, so therefore, those group of people who did not receive this faith, we don't consider them to be amongst the khasirin. As well as those amongst them, the Ahlul Kitab, as mentioned in Surah Ma'idah, minhum ummatun muqtasida. Amongst them are what? A group of people that are moderate. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them. We're not saying that anyone who is not a Muslim bound to Jahannam. That's not what this ayat is saying. Why? Because the word Islam that is being used over here does not necessarily refer to the religion of Islam. It refers to the concept of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, there are many Muslimin around the world, but they're not submissive to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there might be many non-Muslims who are submissive to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, distinction is given over here. I'll give you a couple of examples. Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, when they built the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they made a dua. Rabbana ja'alna muslimayn lak. Oh Allah, make us submissive to your command. Muslimain. There's no Islam at that point. There's no religion of Islam at that point. What are they asking for? They're asking to become submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. But yes, when the religion of Islam has come to you, today no one has that opportunity to say, well, I don't know, I wasn't aware of Islam. Today everybody knows. Even the distinction could be given between the Shias and the Sunnis. While we believe strongly in ittihad, but now this part of the world also realizes that there's a sect called Sunni Islam, there's a sect called Shia Islam. They're able to distinguish between the two. In fact, they have now gained more knowledge about the two sects and the differences that they may have. But we are muqallideen of the marja'iyyah. Our marajih have said what? Don't call our Sunnis to be brothers. They are our nafs and they are our jannah. To that extent, we need to make sure that there's ittihad amongst ourselves. So here in this ayat, another word that is worth explaining is deen. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. When the word deen comes, now it becomes a little bit exclusive. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, upon the completion of this religion, He said, وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. That I am satisfied from you with the religion of Islam. Now when Islam is mentioned as deen, this deen is now exclusive over here. So therefore, realize the fact that what is this deen? For the children sitting over here, if someone asks you, what is deen? I'm sure all of you will give adequate answers. Deen means ibadat. Deen means tawheed. Deen means azadari. Right? All of these are good answers. But for the children, if someone asks you, what is deen? You can tell them AAA. Not the company AAA. AAA. The first A stands for your aqaid, beliefs. The second A stands for your ahkam, the do's and the don'ts. Can you guess the third A? Akhlaq. Right? So you have aqaid, ahkam, and akhlaq. Someone asks you, what is deen? Is it AAA? Easy to remember. First, aqaid, your beliefs. Second, ahkam, the do's and the don'ts. And number three, akhlaq. You know how important this akhlaq is? That if you have aqaid and ahkam, and you have the worst of the akhlaq, the maqam, the place, we see when our Prophet is spoken to, لَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّ مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. O Rasul, if you were stern-hearted, they would have stranded you long time ago. The fact that people stayed with Rasulullah is because إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. We have given you and raised you at the highest standards of morality. Our Prophet is the highest standard of morality. Nabi is here to do what? Nabi is here to attract people, not to deter them. Not to, make them go away from him. So then how is it possible the followers of that Nabi will become such individuals that people are running away from them? Today people are running away from the religion of Islam. Now I understand there's a widespread propaganda that has played a major role. But you and I, as the ambassadors of Islam, Sixth Imam said, كُونُوا دُعَاةً لِلنَّاسِ بِغَيْرِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. Be guides of mankind without using your tongues. You don't have to use your tongue. He said, then how do we guide people? Through your akhlaq, through your etiquettes, through your morals. You don't have to go and say, I'm Muslim. Well, some of us, it's written on our face. But you don't have to say that. It's your akhlaq that you speak louder than your words. So therefore, Rasul's job is what? To raise mankind. Give them maqam which is higher and above others. That's what our vain glory is as far as our Prophet is concerned. If our Prophet wanted to announce that he was God, hypothetically speaking, people would have believed him right away. But he was announcing that he's the Nabi of Allah. People gave him such a hard time. If Rasulullah had said, I am God, and those who are worshipping the sun, and Rasulullah is able to do Raddu Shams, would they not believe this person to be God, who's able to move the sun back? If Rasulullah said, I am God, and people were worshipping the moon, and Rasulullah was able to split the moon, would they not believe Rasulullah is the God? If people were worshipping the stars, and Rasulullah would command the star, it would come down, would they not believe him to be the God? If people were worshipping the trees, and Rasulullah would order the tree to come forward and then move back, would they not believe him to be the God? If people were worshipping the stones and bowing in front of him, would they not believe on someone who would make the stones talk? As Rasulullah did, gave nutq to the stones? Of course. But yet we see Rasulullah declared one thing. There's no glory in false deity. The glory that is found in the rightful servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's your Nabi. So some argue that Nabi comes from Naba, which means what? The bearer of news. Amma yatasa'alun anil naba'il azim. Nabi came to give the news, right? Allah did not need Nabi to be Pagham Rasul, to go ahead and deliver the news. He could have sent anyone to deliver the news. In fact, he did. Who did he send? When Qabil had killed his brother Habil, a crow came as the messenger of Allah to deliver the news. This is what you do, this is how you dig the ground, this is how you bury it. So Allah could have sent anyone to deliver the news. Here some scholars say Nabi is from Nubuv, which means to raise the level of soul. Nabi came so that people who were drowning in zulumat, to bring them out of that and raise their level. Let me give you an example. When we say about this miracle of Rasulullah, that he made the pebbles talk, I'm saying that is not a miracle. Rasulullah did not make the pebbles talk. The pebbles were always talking, according to the ayat of Quran. In min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdik. There's not an object in the world that is not doing the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This carpet is doing the tasbih, the walls are doing the tasbih, the shajar is doing the tasbih, the mountains are doing the tasbih, the leaves are doing the tasbih, the stones are doing the tasbih, the water is doing the tasbih, the animals and the birds and every creation is glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. According to the ayat, in min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdih. What is the later part of the ayat? وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَصْبِيحَهُمْ. You are unable to understand and comprehend the tasbih of these objects. Meaning I can't hear the walls do the tasbih. I can hear the animals. I can't fathom what they're doing, what they're saying. I can't hear the stones. I can't hear the inanimate objects doing the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Quran says, no, they're all doing the tasbih. In min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdih. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَصْبِيحَهُمْ. For my children over here, example. You're sitting in this hall right here. You know how many different types of waves there are in this hall right now? The obvious one that everybody wants is the Wi-Fi. Right? The infrared, the AM radio, the FM radio. All of these waves are here. Can you see them? You need a device like this to catch them, right? You can't deny their existence because you can't see it. Just merely you're unable to fathom it does not mean they don't exist. You can use a specialized device to go ahead and catch these waves. Same thing is here. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make those pebbles talk. Those pebbles were always doing the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but people were not able to listen to them. Rasulullah came, he raised the level of humanity to the extent now they were able to hear the tasbih of these pebbles. That is the maqam of nubuwwat. That is to go ahead and raise the level of the people. Not to drown into zulumat, rather to come out on top. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So akhlaq is the key in as far as our amal are concerned. Our aqaid are inshallah correct. Our ahkam, we are doing our best. But akhlaq is something which everyone has to work on. Even the ulama, the scholars. They're the teachers of aqaid and ahkam, yet some of them have the worst of the akhlaq. I mean, when we quote the stories of Masumeen, people say, well, they were imams, they were Masum, how can we look at them and follow their lead? Well, that's the reason Allah sent them as bashar to you, so you can follow them. Not as angels. They lived a life like you and I do, having a family, going through the struggles of the family life, working, earning halal, all of the struggles that imams went through, you and I go through in our lives, they went through. Yet they maintained that level. But I won't give you the example of the imams. I'll give you the example of those who are fallibles like you and I. There's a story that is mentioned of, there are two, father and son, Mullah Ahmad al-Naraqi and Mullah Mahdi al-Naraqi. The father wrote Jami' al-Sa'adat, and this is a book on akhlaq, a collector of felicities. And then the son came and he wrote Miraj al-Sa'adat, the peak of sa'adat and prosperity. When the father had written this book, Jami' al-Sa'adat, this book reached the marja of the time in Najaf at that time, Syed Baharul Ulum. He received this book, he read it cover to cover, and he was really impressed by it. He said, I wish I get to see the author of this book one day. Mullah Mehdi Naraqi, he lived, Ahmad Naraqi, they lived in Iran. And this was in Najaf. Back then it wasn't easy to travel. But the author of the book made this travel to Atabat Aliyah to go for ziyarat. When he arrived in Najaf, now he was a scholar of his time as well. I'm going to give, I don't name ulama of the time, but I'll give you just so that you can understand the caliber of these people. Imagine today, in the city of Najaf, you have one of the Maraja, Ayatollah Sistani, and one of the Marja of Qom, let's say Ayatollah Wahid, Khurasani, he travels to Najaf. This caliber of ulama. When someone like Wahid comes to Najaf, the unofficial standard of Hawza Ilmiya is that if a marja of that caliber comes, they don't go around visiting the scholars. All the scholars go visit him. So Mullah Mehdi Naraqi, he comes to Najaf, all the scholars of the time, they go and see him. Except who? Syed Baharul Ulum. He doesn't go. People in his circle looked at that to be an insult. But then Mullah Mehdi Naraqi said, that's okay. Syed, Buzurgwar, he's busy. I'll go see him. He said, okay. You're breaking the protocol, but so fine. He comes to the Taqiyagah, the place where Syed Baharul Ulum used to give his dars. He was giving the dars. Like right now, lecture is going on. Usually when a scholar walks in, you stop, you pause, you make sure that they come and they sit down, and then you continue the lecture. Mullah Mehdi Naraqi walks in, Syed Baharul Ulum pays no attention to him. Zero attention. People notice that. That's another insult. Syed Mullah Mehdi Naraqi, he didn't mind. He sat until the dars ended, came up, shook hands, did not receive a warm welcome, and then he went away. People noticed that as well. Then Mullah Mehdi Naraqi went for Karbala Ziyarat, Samarra, and after he returned, he went back through Najaf. Now when he came back to Najaf, thinking that maybe Syed Baharul Ulum will come and visit him now, he wasn't expecting, people were. Syed Baharul Ulum didn't. He said, well, go send a message to their office that inshallah we want to come and see him again. They sent the message to his office. As soon as the message arrived, Syed Baharul Ulum ran barefoot, waiting at the door outside to receive Mullah Mehdi Naraqi. Then he received him, brought him inside, sat him on his masnad, himself sat down, and he said, give us some waz, guide us. This is the marja of time. Now people are noticing. What happened? The first 2 or 3 mulaqat, he paid no attention. In fact, if anything, that was an insult. And in this 3rd mulaqat, he goes out of his way to go ahead and receive him, sit him down in his masnad, and ask him to give irshad and to give some advice. Then Syed Baharul Ulum explained. He said, this man has written a book called Jami' Sa'adat, a collector of felicities, which is a marvelous book on akhlaq. Anything that you want to know about akhlaq, you can read that book. I suggest all of you can find the English translation, it's there. He said, anything that you want to learn about akhlaqiyat, you can find it in this book. All the ethical morality is mentioned in it. I wanted to see that the author of this book, has he written this book for a public, or he himself practices that as well. He said, I tested him twice to see his akhlaq, but he went above and beyond what he has written in his book. We didn't see any sort of, agitation from him. And that was the test that I wanted to go through. Otherwise, there is no insult whatsoever. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. example of it is found in a recent Habibullah Rashti and Sheikh Jafar Shustri, both great scholars of their time in Najaf. Both, and again I'm giving the examples of the akhlaq of ulama, so that you don't say, well, how can we follow the akhlaq of Ahlul Bayt? Because they were masoom. This is ghayr masoom. You can easily follow their akhlaq. Both of their groups, these two scholars, they had differences of opinion. They sat down on a friendly mubahatha, or to go ahead and speak about the differences. Jafar Shustri and his people, Habibullah Rashti and his people. As they were going back and forth, and apparently Jafar Shustri had an upper hand, Habibullah Rashti said something insulting to Jafar Shustri. Now, this was a place where things could get ugly. Now people were speaking and voices were being raised. This is common. Even in the time of Rasulullah, when Rasulullah is on his deathbed, he asked for a pen and a paper. There was a commotion that happened. Rasulullah says, give me pen and paper. Aktub lakum shay'an lam tadillu ba'di. I'll write something for you and you will not go astray. People start commission. That innahu la yahjur. The man has gone mad. Na'udhu billah. And so on and so forth. So there was this commotion. Sheikh Jafar Shustri, he paused for a moment. While people were expecting, as we say in Urdu, dandan shikan jawab, right? That he would give a response which will silence everyone. He stands up, he goes over to Habibullah Rashti and kisses his hand. The entire energy was sucked down that was raised in that hall at that moment. Everybody calmed down right away. And then everybody went away. The followers of Sheikh Jafar Shustri, they asked him, how come you didn't respond to him? He said, I had 70 different responses. Not one, not two, 70. That too, dalail naqli. But if I had given any one of those responses, shaitan would have been victorious and us human beings would have lost. Because that would have led to even further agitation between mu'mineen. By not responding to him and consuming that energy and not considering that this will make me look bad, I diffused and I went ahead and raised a hand towards friendship and mutual agreement. I kissed his hand. He said, I had the ability to answer. You know how many times you have an answer for someone and you know this is a good comeback answer, yet controlling your anger at that point, suppressing your anger at that point, that is called qazimin al-ghayz. And when you're able to control that ghayz that sometimes come into us. That's why we have Masumeen whose title is Musa al-Kazim. Salawat bi Muhammad. I was told to keep it, finish it early today. Inshallah we will. But this is the gist of the 3 lectures that we had today, and these 3 nights. Today, just to summarize all that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this book not just for it to be on the top shelf, rusting there, collecting dust so that you can use it for tayammum. No, rather for us to use this book, to read it, understand it, implement it in our lives. When it comes to our ibadat, create some hal in your ibadat. Don't leave this ibadah to be just a burden on your shoulders so you can get rid of it as soon as possible. You start enjoying this ibadah. The way you enjoy other things in your life, have that feeling so that you will be anticipating when the time for salat comes in. And that's what we learned from the people in Karbala as well. You know, on the day of Ashur, Imam al-Islam, in the middle of the day, around the time of Dhuhr, one of his companions, he reminds Imam of Salat. He says, "Oh Mawla, it's time for Salat al-Dhuhr. We want to offer one more Salat behind you." Imam said, "Ja'alaka Allahu min al-musallin." May Allah make you amongst those who are musallin. He made dua for him. Maybe someone might have said, what is this time for salat? We're in the middle of a battle. Yet Imam said, no. This is the reason what we have come here for. This Karbala, this battle, is so that the salat still says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. This salat still has, Hayya al-falah, Hayya al-salah. That's the purpose of ours. But look at the namaz that Imam offered. Usually when namaz is offered, you have the Imam in front and you have the Mamoom behind them. But this is a unique salat that is being offered on the day of Ashur, where Imam al-Hussein is leading the prayer. People are standing behind him, but there are still Mamumeen that are standing in front of Imam as well. Syed and Zuhair. You know, when Imam said to Habib, oh Habib, tell them that we want to pause for namaz. Habib went and said that to Shimr. Shimr responded by saying, go ahead and pray, your salat is not accepted. And they continued to shoot arrows toward Imam ﷺ. When Imam started the prayer, they were still shooting arrows. So the human shields in the form of Syed and Zuhair stood in front of Imam ﷺ. As Imam prayed this, offered the salat, Salatul Khawf, when Imam finished the salat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Syed fell to the ground. As soon as Syed fell to the ground, Imam picked him up. There were 13 arrows that had pierced through the body of Syed. The first thing that he said, O Imam, hal wafaytu? O Imam, have I been loyal to you? Imam said, indeed, you have shown loyalty, O Syed. This is the same salat that was being protected by Imam Hussein, and that is the reason in the court of Yazid, when Imam Zainul Abidin is speaking, what is the harba that the enemy uses? They use this adhan to stop the speech of Imam Zainul Abidin. Imam was speaking, Yazid orders, because the people, their hearts were munqalib from the speech of Imam Zainul Abidin. Yazid orders the muazzin, go ahead and give adhan. The same way Hurmala was ordered, Iqta Kalam al-Hussein, when he took that three-pronged arrow that struck Ali Asghar on his neck. The same was said, go ahead and iqta kalam of Ali ibn Hussein by giving the adhan. As soon as the adhan started, Imam stopped his speech. It was said, Allahu Akbar. Imam said, Jalla Jalaluhu. He said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Imam said, Jalla Jalaluhu. He said, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Imam said to the muazzin, stop for a moment. When you reach Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, let me ask you this question. Is this Muhammad your judge, or this Muhammad is my judge? He responded that if you say it's your judge, then everybody knows you're lying. And if you recognize that he was my judge, then look at how you're treating his family. Look at how his granddaughters are without any veils, and they've been chained in front. Yazid ordered that Imam Zainul Abidin be struck. As soon as that order was given, Zainab stands up to protect Imam of the time. Zainab said, oh Yazid, if you want to hit Zainul Abidin, you'll have to hit me first. Yazid orders Zainab to be hit as well. Fidda stands up and she says, oh Yazid, if you touch Zainab, you'll have to go through Fidda. Fidda looked around the court of Yazid. She saw these Habshi ghulam, or she saw these Habshi people who were standing there. She said to them, these guards, what is wrong with you? Where's your ghayrat? Someone from your community is being struck, yet you have no ghayrat. Right away these Habshi people said, oh Yazid, if anyone hit Fidda, there will be blood over here flowing. No one had dared to touch Fidda. Just imagine what would go through the minds of Zainab. Oh Baba, she must have looked through Najaf. She must have turned towards Medina. Oh Nana, the time has come for your granddaughter, that there are people who will stand up for Khanis and Ghulam, yet they will not stand up for Zainab. ألا لعنة الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Allah, please accept our ibadah tonight. Allah, we've committed a lot of sins, please forgive our sins. Allah, give us the tawfiq and ability to follow the commands and the teaching of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah, hasten the appearance of our weighted Imam and make us amongst the helpers and the followers of Imam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.